I really appreciate this comment. I'm a boomer. I remember being able to deduct the interest you paid on credit cards, and the interest rate was low. Politicians ruining this country. If this is your first time seeing me, my name is Kat, and I'm the Boomer Slayer. And I've got visuals. Let me introduce you to a fun little thing called political power. Baby boomers hold 47.4% of the political power in the United States. Silent Gen has 12.1%, Gen X has 29%, and millennials only have 10%. Poor Gen Z. How do we calculate this political power? Well, thank you. I'm so glad you asked. Political power is calculated by voter distribution, political spending, federal positions, state positions, and local positions. Baby boomers make up 32% of the voter distribution, 39% of the spending, 59% of federal positions, 68% of state positions, and 39% of local positions. When you look at political spending, Silent Gen and Boomers control almost 80% of the political spending. And if this isn't clear enough that we don't have an equal distribution of representatives in this country, then this will give you a good representation. Look at this. And even though there are more millennials out in the workforce and in the population, look at this tiny fraction of representation. It's easy to just point the finger at the politicians and yeah, a lot of them. But when you look at voter distribution and who's taking up these seats, you can clearly see why it's so easy for us to say boomers are the problem.
So this TikToker by the name of OG Boomer Slayer points out something that's really interesting and a testament to how terribly the United States was designed. The truth about the United States is that it was designed specifically by rich white slaveholders. And these slaveholders basically organized the country in such a way that was anti-democratic but seemed democratic. That was actually the whole purpose of the United States Senate, the Electoral College, and other institutions like the Supreme Court, for example. They were designed specifically to make sure that rich white men in particular were insulated from any popular democratic forces. The harsh reality is that the United States has pretty arcane systems when it comes to who is even allowed to get to the ballot box. Like, for example, we have felony voting laws, and people are not allowed to vote from prison. And that has created this incentive where, through the war on drugs, they've managed to create the largest prison population in the world. Yes, that's right. The United States is the most authoritarian police state by the numbers in the world. And the reason for that imprisonment was very, very clear. It was to stop marginalized people from getting access to the ballot box. It is why, in states like Tennessee, for example, nearly 10% of the entire voting age population is denied the right to vote due to a prior felony or current incarceration. When you throw on top of that all of the laws that exist, like voter ID laws, the placement of polling locations, the voter purges that happen across the country. Quite literally, our country is designed to make sure that the wealthiest, whitest people around have the most political influence. A lot of people are simply not allowed to vote in the United States, and a lot of people have an incredibly difficult time voting in the United States. But then, when you look at the way those votes are counted, people living in rural areas are disproportionately overrepresented, and people living in urban areas are disproportionately underrepresented. But when you consider all these facts, and then you throw on top of it the fact that senators are only elected once every 6 years, and the election of senators is staggered in time to basically make sure that one massive wave of a pro-democracy movement is not enough to change the body of the Senate, then when you recognize that the Supreme Court has an extreme amount of outsized power, and the fact that the Supreme Court has to be approved by the President and the Senate, then you can recognize that between the Electoral College and the Senate and the Supreme Court, there are extreme buffers that put in place stops on democracy to basically make sure that any pro-democracy movement, any working class movement, has to be running perpetually for 1 or 2 generations before there's any type of substantial change. In fact, just look at Franklin Delano Roosevelt, for example. He won the presidency 4 times. And that is what got the first liberal Supreme Court in American history that was completely erased after the Bush and Obama administration. And FDR wasn't even pushing for any sort of radical movement to reshape society. He was literally putting in social safety nets to protect capitalism from itself. Then when you consider the fact that money plays into politics, and then you consider the fact that there's a generational gap in wealth, you start to realize that what is happening right now, what we are seeing the Supreme Court do, what we are seeing Republicans do when it comes to cracking down on voting rights, when it comes to cracking down on fundamental human rights, the purpose is basically twofold. One is to suppress any potential votes of opposition, And two is to create more avenues for criminalization of marginalized people in order to make sure that they're not allowed to vote in our already biased system, in our system that's already designed to prevent any type of positive change. And the unfortunate reality is that the Democrats are very busy protecting that system. Even though the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, Joe Biden came out and specifically said that he didn't want to get rid of the filibuster and that he doesn't want to expand the Supreme Court. So he has made it very clear that he wants the Supreme Court to continue to make people's lives terrible for generations to come. And the reason for this is because of the demographic shift that Democrats keep talking about brings them so much opportunity. Well, when you look at younger people today are more embracing of politics that is counter to capitalism. More young people today are embracing the idea of socialism. They're talking about an economy that is not structured around increasing profits, but instead is structured around common prosperity. But instead of having any type of common prosperity for working class people in the United States, the systems and structures we have in place are designed specifically to suppress the interests of working class people. And in this instance, because of the generational gap in wealth, it means that a lot of the baby boomer generation continuing to vote against the interests of younger people and actively undermining any type of human rights that they have and actively trying to criminalize their existence to make sure that they're not allowed to vote in the future, to make sure that the only millennials and Gen Z folks that survive to vote in the next generation are the ones who are reactionary enough that the baby boomer generation finds to be acceptable to lead the country for the next 100 years. This is obviously a pretty terrifying situation. And the harsh reality is that as long as we maintain faith in the system as it is, as long as we allow super PACs to buy up our democracy, as long as we allow the Supreme Court to overturn fundamental rights, then none of this is fundamentally going to change. And as long as we have people who are bending over backwards to defend people like Joe Biden, while he is actively supporting these current institutions, then we're basically put in this position where we are effectively trapped. But the good news is there's a huge wave of labor organizing that's happening across the country, and fundamentally, within the United States, that is the only substantial way that there's actually been material change. When you have working class people standing up within their workplaces to demand not only changes within their workplaces, not only higher wages, but also fight to demand that the political system actually bend to the will of working class people, that we recognize that our political system is bought out by giant corporations, and that organized strikes and mobilization of the working class can fundamentally make demands of the capitalist class that they actually capitulate to our desires. The fact that this labor movement is escalating is also the exact reason why Democrats are pushing so hard against people trying to do anything about the problems we're facing. It's why they keep telling people that voting is the only option, when the harsh reality is, if we want fundamental change, the profits of the companies that are funding the system as it is need to be threatened with organized labor. And they need to be threatened with organized labor paired with the demand that our economy, that our government fundamentally be changed to serve the interests of the working class. This is Ben Carollo with Rebel Headquarters. You can catch my show Galaxy Brain every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Young Turks Twitch channel, and you can follow me at Benjamin Carollo on Twitter.